You're listening to Bold Hearts, Big Moves, the show for female entrepreneurs who want it all: a thriving business, deep self love, and fulfilling relationships. I'm Erin Anderson, and each week we will dive into how to set stronger boundaries, make empowered choices, and show up in life and business with boldness, authenticity, and heart. Because let's be real, the money you make is directly related to the love that you have for yourself and the strength of your relationships. So if you're ready to lead with love and make those big moves with those bold hearts, let's dive in.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Bold Hearts, Big Moves. This is the podcast where female entrepreneurs can come and they can learn about how to heal trauma. They can learn about how to create better relationships through boundaries, and they can also learn how to create more cash flow because they're feeling confident about their boundaries and their relationships as well. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about what this episode is today. And we're talking about how your emotions are actually the voice of your self-compassion. And I feel like this is one of the things that not just female entrepreneurs, but humanity in general struggles with. And the reason being is because there's so much judgment around emotions. And people that feel emotions and oh my gosh, if somebody's feeling something, well then there's labels, right? Like there's something attached to us if we are feeling something. And because of that, there's also a lot of guilt and shame that come along with our emotional journeys. And so oftentimes what we try to do is we either try to shut them off and stop feeling, but that makes this very, very hard to connect with, including connecting with ourselves. Or we kind of end up judging ourselves for feeling this way. Like, why on earth am I feeling angry? I have no right to feel angry, or I have no right to feel sad, or why am I even feeling this way? This is so stupid, blah, 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 right? I see this a lot. And one of the things that's really awesome about like the female entrepreneur community is a lot of them do not have like this voice of the victim so much in their heads, because they're very much like getter-doners, like get out, let's get things done. Let's do what we need to do, right? But oftentimes because that's like so far in the front of their mind, this is do, they're not actually realizing or paying attention to like what is their actual mental blocks that is stopping them from creating the relationships or the money or healing the trauma that they've been wanting to heal for a long time, or even realizing that the trauma is there, creating issues for them, right? And so this is why I wanted to do this podcast episode, is to help you understand that if you're arriving at self-judgment, then we really need to go a lot deeper. And there's ways that we can go a lot deeper and arrive at our self-compassion. But first, let's talk about like what are our emotions, right? Again, they're not scary. They're something that if you're human, you have emotions. And honestly, if you're a living, breathing being, you have emotions. They've even done studies on plants that have emotions, right? This is why, like, they did a study years ago about, what would happen if if these scientists spoke only awful words to the plant versus the kind words to another plant. And the one that had been spoken, these awful words to, actually did end up withering and dying, where the one that was spoken the kind words and the loving words ended up thriving. And I actually did a science experiment like this, similarly to this, with one of my sons a couple of years ago. And what we did is instead of plants, we took water, distilled water, and we spoke loving, kind words to the one and froze it. And then we spoke hateful, angry, uh, destroying, damaging words to the other and froze it. And it was really interesting what happened. The one that had the loving words spoken to it, it froze in a beautiful pattern, like the ice was really, really gorgeous. It was well formed. And if you shaved off like a little bit of the ice crystal, the crystals were again very well formed. And look at this under a microscope. But the one that we spoke angry, destroying words to, it didn't freeze well. Um, it was almost like frozen in chunks, and inside of it was actually a gaping hole. And then when you shaved off the chunks of that, they were disorganized and disformed. It's very interesting the energy that our words create. Now, why am I saying this when I'm talking about like what are emotions, right? Well, our words often attach to emotions. And if you think about the 5-step thought process, you've got your uh your thought, not your thoughts, the actual facts, the circumstances of what happened, then your thoughts about the circumstance, then you have your emotions, then you have uh what you do, like your actions, right? About the emotions or the thoughts. And finally we get our results. Okay? And when we're talking about an emotion, it's such a central key part of that 5-step thought process, but it first and foremost comes because of the thoughts that we have about what happened. And oftentimes we're not even completely aware of the circumstance. We just know that we have these thoughts, right? It could have happened, something could have happened like way back in childhood that we don't remember, but yet it still solidifies certain thoughts in our psyche that are causing certain belief systems, and those belief systems are creating actions, creating results. It's a cycle that we keep going through every single day. And so we want to break these cycles if we are going to create, the healthy relationships, the 6 figures, uh, all of those things, right? But the emotions are key in this process because they get your attention. That is what emotions do, and that's why they're so important, is they're simply there to get your attention to something that is or is not working. But because we're having some sort of an emotional reaction, oftentimes our brains go deeper into this and we're saying things like, I'm such a horrible human. Something is wrong with me. I will never create those 6 figures. Creating 6 figures is really hard. I will never have people that support me. I can't ever find the right people to join my business. I can't, right? Or you might even, it might even be something in the home. If you're a female entrepreneur and you've got, a home life with kids and a husband, like I do, there's thoughts attached to that that can impact your business, such as, well, if I'm going to fail in my home, I'm going to be a failure in my business. Like that's a big one, right? No success, no failure in the home can equate for success in a business, or like there's lots of things out there, lots of words that are being thrown at us at a daily basis, and things that have entered our psyche from the get-go that create all of these emotions and all of the stigma. And the emotion oftentimes can re-trigger the trauma. But this is why it's really important to listen and not judge, right? See, when we're feeling anything, frustration, anger, disappointment, these are signs that we need to set a boundary. It's not something, it's not a sign that we're a bad person or that we've got something wrong necessarily. It just gives us a better perspective if we think about it for a second and we listen to it. It gives us a better perspective to ask really good questions, such as, why is this making me angry? What am I feeling is wrong here? Why am I feeling violated? Right? If we go into question mode instead of self-judgment mode, we're honestly going to hear the voice of our self-compassion. And now let me give you an example of this, okay? I had a client, and she runs actually a multi-seven-figure business. But one of her biggest struggles, one of her most, I should say, difficult relationships. One of the relationships that really, really caused her the greatest struggle was her struggle with her mom. And, you know, I think anybody would possibly struggle with a mom who was demanding money, wouldn't want to spend her own money, even though she retired, she has the money to do what she needs to do. She expected my client to pay for everything so she didn't have to. And she would get very angry or victimy when my client would say, no, I'm not going to do that. Right? And it really started bothering my client. And it had been bothering my client for a long time because she felt like her mom was constantly trying to take things from her, whether it be recognition, whether it be praise, whether it be money. She believed she was somehow entitled to the success of my client. And as I was listening to my client, I started asking her, okay, so what emotions do you feel thinking about this? So she started listing off there. Well, there was a lot of anger, frustration, hurt, disappointment. Um, and she listed off quite a few more, but you can kind of see why she would feel that way, right? This is her mother. She wants a different type of relationship with her mom, but mom's not on board with that kind of relationship. And that is something that can hurt because we mourn the loss of a relationship. This is why we mourn people that pass away, right? Relationships can also pass away, or relationships can also never be born. Either way, these are things that we would naturally mourn. And so she was feeling almost like this state of mourning happening, right? But she kept using, as she was talking to me about how she was feeling, she kept using a word over and over and over again, and it was manipulation, right? How she was feeling like she was manipulated, and how she was feeling badly because if she didn't do things the way her mom wanted her to, then mom would withdraw, mom would go to other family members and complain, and so she'd be hearing it from many different sides, right? And so we came down to the statement of, I will not be manipulated. See, boundaries are born based upon our self-compassion, not based upon our self-judgment. So I asked her to say that out loud a couple of times. I will not be manipulated. I will not be manipulated. I will not be manipulated. And so she did. And I asked her to tell me kind of what happened to the intensity of the emotions that she was feeling around her mom. And it was amazing to watch as the intensity of those emotions just kind of got smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. They were still there a little bit because we hadn't quite set the boundary. And if you remember, you've got those 7 different types of boundaries. And so we started going through each one of the boundaries because we have to have the do, right? If we want a different result than the one that we're getting, well, the thing right before it, the piece right before the result is the action piece. And this is where our boundaries are important, right? It's what we are going to do about uh what happens when we're feeling manipulated, right? Well, she decided first she would make the request. I am not comfortable with this conversation. I am not comfortable with you asking me these things. Please stop. She made the request, right? And then when that request goes ignored, she set, and it did, she set the boundary, right? And after she set the boundary, if it was ignored again, then she would follow through with the boundary. And so what her boundary was, Mom, if you continue trying to push this, I will not answer the phone. I will not be taking you places. I will not be around you because I am not your money bags. If that is all you're going to see, then there's no reason for me to continue this conversation. So she implemented her boundary, and she wouldn't answer the phone to her mom. She would only, her mom would send her text after text after text after text. She would read the text to see if mom had anything different to say. And if mom didn't have anything different to say and she was blaming and why won't you talk to me? I mean, I'm trying to have a relationship with you, blah, blah, blah. My client did not respond. But when mom would ask a simple question about, like, how would you do this with your money? She did respond to those. And eventually, mom caught the hint that I'm not gonna, like, she's not gonna talk to me about this, and I'm not going to be, she's not gonna be manipulated, right? And she started doing this same thing also with the other people around her in her life. She's not going to be manipulated. And so if they're going to try to manipulate through whatever means, then this was just not a conversation she was going to have. And she would not have a conversation with that person or these people in general, any person, in fact, until they could have a conversation where it was respectful. There wasn't any manipulation. There wasn't any boohooing. It was something where everybody felt loved and supported. And that was her boundary. And it worked well for her. And what was amazing to watch is as she also implemented this in her business started working better because her people, her employees, were living a different standard in the workplace. Instead of trying to manipulate things and manipulate her through workers' comp or whatever it was, when she came down to the I will not be manipulated, people naturally started to respect that. And she started attracting more respect and more support in her life because she shut the door off at manipulation. Now, here's the deal though. It is very common, again, for women to judge themselves. I think in women especially to judge themselves really harshly in moments of overwhelm, especially in business, because when you're balancing business and family, you can judge yourself pretty harshly and say, oh, I'm not doing anything, or oh, I'm Facebook scrolling, or I'm sitting here watching a movie and I should be doing this and 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 this. There's no time. And I hear this one too. There's no time for me. There's no time for downtime. There's no downtime. And that can create a big problem for you as well because we're mistaking self-care for laziness or a lack of drive. And that's not the case oftentimes. And oftentimes you'll notice, like, if you finally start giving yourself some white space on your calendar or some downtime, it can feel like you need so much more, right? And oftentimes I notice this about myself. Like when I started first taking care of me and really leaning into self-care, it didn't mean like always getting a massage, always getting my hair done, my nails done, blah, blah, blah. It didn't always mean that. But what it did mean was that I was very aware of who I was and what my needs were. And that meant that I was responsible for meeting my needs. And if I had a need for downtime, I would schedule it out and I would just do whatever I wanted to do, whether I wanted to craft, create, draw, watch a movie, something. It was my downtime. And I took it very seriously. At first, I felt like I needed so much of it because it was a whole lot like having water after I had been thirsted for years. And I just wanted to drink and drink and drink and drink and drink and drink and drink, right? But the consistency is what created the peace around taking time for myself. There's always something to do. There's always something more in our homes, in our personal lives, in our businesses. There's always something to do, right? But this is why it's very important to not have anything to do sometimes. Even if your brain is sitting there screaming, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to prioritize downtime in order to be productive. Because if you don't, your body and your brain will start taking it when it is the most inconvenient. Okay? So let's start asking some better questions. Like, again, when you're noticing these emotions, ask yourself questions like, okay, why is this here? Right? And kind of like my client did. What is this emotion? First, identify the emotion. Why is it here? Well, because mom is making unreasonable demands. That's still her thought. It might be true, but it's still the thought, right? Okay, how do I feel about these unreasonable demands? Well, I feel betrayed. I feel neglected. I feel overlooked. I feel. How often do I find myself feeling this way? Do I find myself feeling this way with more than one person? That's an interesting observation. Yes, I do. So is there something I'm believing that I need to change? One belief I see a lot when we get to this point is setting boundaries is mean. Whenever I try to set a boundary, people yell, people scream, people throw a big, huge fit, or they leave me, or there's that fear of rejection that comes up at this point, right? But when we realize that setting boundaries is the kindest thing we can do, not only for ourselves, but also for the other individual, boundary setting isn't so bad. When we realize that the other person can behave however they want to behave, but it doesn't mean that it's going to rebuild and restore your trust, that's okay. Let me give you an example of this. And I'll actually do it for my own marriage because, one of the things that my husband and I have worked on is this very same thing in our communication. And for a long time, whenever I would bring a problem up to my husband, he would shut down or he'd get mad or he would react negatively to what I was saying, right? And this is a common problem in marriages. And sometimes the roles were reversed. Whenever he would bring a problem to me, I would act the same way. I would act angry, or I'd shut down and I would play the victim card, right? And it didn't do either one of us any good at all. And so he and I have worked on our communication, one of the things that we ended up having to do is respect the other person's belief. It didn't mean it had to be true for us. It's just we're going to respect whatever happens over here, right? So what that looked like from my perspective, and my husband did this with me too, is, well, I can tell that was really super triggering for you. However, we're not going to get anywhere in a discussion with you acting this way. So I'm going to stop the discussion now. If you need to pout, that is your business. But I still feel the way I do. And you acting this way is not helping my trust in you. So when you want to come back and have a discussion with me where you can actually hear me out without getting really hurt and offended, then we will continue this. And it took a lot of years of us both doing the same thing. And sometimes I was at the receiving end of that. And oh my gosh, it was super triggering. But the truth of the matter is it gave me the opportunity to listen to those triggers. Getting triggered isn't a bad thing. If we're triggering somebody and they're having a hard time with what they're feeling, that is not our fault. My husband being honest with me and triggering me was a good thing. And if I'm going to be honest with myself, I'm going to recognize where there's truth in what he's saying. If I'm not sure, or if I don't feel like there's truth there, instead of telling him he's a liar, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get good at asking questions. So that way we can discern if there's truth. And this is where that listening boundary comes in, right? Something can be true, and if it is, we adjust. Something cannot be true, and so we do nothing. Or we're not sure if something's true or not, and so we need to get more information. We need to ask better questions, right? And that gives us the clarity that we need and we seek. Now, my husband and I, whenever we have an issue with each other, we listen, we filter it through our boundary, and if there's something we need to own, we own it. If there's not something there, we can say, that doesn't really feel true, right? And our goal is not to be offended by each other. We're just simply here to learn. Or 3, I'm not sure if that's true or not. I need to ask more questions. Can I ask some questions so that way I can understand where you're coming from better, right? This also works well when we're dealing with people in our business. A strong listening boundary is going to help you a ton in your business, because when you're doing business, you open yourself up to judgment. You absolutely do. And some of that judgment or that feedback, quote unquote, is going to be true, and so we adjust. Not true, so we do nothing, whether that person likes it or not. Or sometimes we need to ask more questions and get to the root of the issue, right? Understanding these skills in our relationships help make us better entrepreneurs, because when we're really good at our personal relationships, and the relationship with ourself actually is the one that comes first. This is why it's important to have this self-compassion, is because once we understand what our emotions are really trying to tell us and trying to get our attention to, When we become good at our self-compassion, we become good at our self-relationship. When we become good at our self-relationship, we can see these same patterns in other people, the people that we serve, our clientele, and they know that we get them. When we get them, they want to work with us, and that creates more in our business. So, my loves, I want to kind of recap just some really key points here in what we talked about today. Again, your emotions are not the voice of your self-judgment. They are the voice of your self-compassion. When you go deep enough, you will realize, and by asking certain questions, you will realize that the emotion dissipates and goes away because you listened, you heard it. What is the truth that your emotion is trying to communicate to you? Why are you frustrated with your business? Why are you frustrated with your relationships? Or even, I feel really excited. Why am I feeling excited? What is it about the excitement that makes me want to go forward with this and lean into this even more? It's very important that we listen to these things and understand what our emotions are trying to tell us. Because then, when we have that level of self-compassion, we have a level of authenticity because we are good at our relationship with ourselves, which creates a relationship with other people. And when you have that relationship with other people, they understand that you know them, you get them, you know what they need very well. And you're here to help them get those things. And this is where trust is built, because if you're consistent with listening to your emotions and allowing it to take you to your self-compassion, you are also consistent in the way that you show up for other people. And consistency creates cash flow, which is what we're going to be talking about next week. So stay tuned. How healing trauma creates more cash flow in your lives. All right, my loves. Until next week, I will see you soon. And one more thing. If you guys would like to schedule a call with me where I go through your personal relationships, your relationship with yourself, your business relationships, and your relationship with money, so I can help you see what it is you're saying about your money blocks and how to remove them. Schedule a call with me. The link is in the description below. Let's chat, because I am very excited to help you guys live this lifestyle, overcome your money blocks, and create your next 6 figures. Okay, my loves, until next week, see you soon. Bye.
All right, Boundary Boss babes. I'm super excited that you tuned in with me today. Make sure you tune in again next week as we chat about more Boundary Boss babe topics. We're going to get into so many other things about how to set boundaries with your business, how to set boundaries with your relationships, so you can truly have the time, the money, and the flexibility that you are seeking. So tune in next week. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast. Let your other boss babe friends know about it. And also, if you've got any questions, make sure you submit them into the podcast by clicking on the send us a text message at the bottom of the podcast description. I look forward to seeing you guys next week. See you later, boss babes.